Okay, so psychology and democracy, huh? You've given us quite the trio of sources this time, aren't Winnicott, Butler? This is going to be good.
Yeah, it's really about the human element at the heart of it all. We tend to focus on the systems, the voting, the policies.
Like the mechanics of it all.
Exactly. But democracy hinges on so much more than that. It hinges on us, on our
Mhm.
psychology, our emotional maturity as individuals and as a whole society.
Which is where I imagine someone like Hannah Arendt comes in. She really dove into the darker side of human nature, especially in the context of totalitarian regimes.
Yeah, in her book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, well, let's just say it's a sobering read. One of her arguments that always gets me is how loneliness isn't just some personal struggle, it's a tool, a weapon. Tyrannical regimes, they thrive on isolating people, making them distrustful of each other.
Divide and conquer, right? But on a whole other level.
Exactly. Arendt talked about this back in the 1950s, long before social media and filter bubbles. She was way ahead of her time.
So what you're saying is that without those different perspectives, those reality checks from outside our own little bubbles, we become much easier to manipulate.
Think about it. If you can't tell what's true anymore, how can you possibly make informed decisions about the information thrown at you every single day, let alone choose leaders who actually reflect what you believe in?
And this is where Donald Winnicott enters the picture. He was all about this idea of a mature democracy, right?
Right. And for Winnicott, that maturity was deeply tied to our psychological development. Which makes sense, considering he started as a pediatrician and then became a psychoanalyst. So he was really looking at societal structures through this lens of individual growth.
So he's basically applying what he knows about how kids develop to how entire societies function. Okay, I like where this is going. So what makes for a mature citizen in a democracy, according to Winnicott?
Well, one of the key things he talks about is this ability to express your deep-seated feelings, separate from your conscious thoughts. And he actually saw the act of voting as a perfect example of this.
So it's not just about rationally weighing the pros and cons of a candidate or their policies.
It's deeper than that. It's about your values,
Yeah.
your understanding of the world, the things that resonate with you on a more fundamental level.
Okay, I'm with you so far. So where do these antisocial individuals, Winnicott talks about, fit into all of this?
Yes. Well, he categorized them into three types. First, you've got your classic, in-your-face, antisocial individual, no regard for societal rules, and they make sure everyone knows it.
Yeah, those guys.
Then there are the ones who are all about authority, clinging to it, mirroring it, the hidden antisocials, as Winnicott calls them. And finally, you have the group that tends to be swayed by those first two.
So it's like a spectrum of how people relate to rules and authority in society.
Precisely. But here's the catch, and it's a bit unsettling. Winnicott believed that it's the hidden antisocials, the ones who seem so fixated on order and authority figures, who actually pose the greatest threat to democracy.
Wait, really? Why them? I would have thought it was the blatant rule breakers causing all the trouble.
It's because they crave that structure, that order. Sounds good on the surface, right? But they lack that internal compass, that ability to judge right and wrong, morally and ethically. They're so busy trying to please those in power that they end up enabling the truly destructive behavior of the more overt types.
So we're talking about those who fly under the radar a bit. Not the obvious troublemakers, but those who might even seem like model citizens on the surface. But it's their deep need for authority, for structure, that can actually make them more susceptible to manipulation.
It's like they're looking for someone to tell them what to think, how to behave.
And that makes them easy targets for those who are more than happy to exploit that need.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, how do we protect against that? How do we cultivate that kind of emotional maturity, both in ourselves and in society as a whole?
Because it's not like we can psychoanalyze every political candidate or every person in a position of power, right?
Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? But you're right, it's not about mass therapy sessions or anything. Winnicott, because of his background, starting with children, he really believed in the power of those early experiences to shape our capacity for empathy, for understanding. He went so far as to say that true democracy actually begins in the ordinary, commonplace home.
So he's talking about parenting, right? Early childhood education, creating those safe, nurturing spaces where kids feel seen and heard.
Exactly. When children feel safe to express their emotions, to work through conflict constructively, they're much more likely to grow into adults who can handle the, well, messiness of democracy.
Adults who can disagree respectfully,
Hmm.
who can listen to understand, not just respond.
Right, and who can work towards solutions together, even when things get heated.
Which means we need to get comfortable with disagreement ourselves,
Right.
to be open to having our own assumptions challenged.
Absolutely. And this is where I think Octavia Butler's emphasis on knowledge and action comes in. It's not enough to just be, like, passively nice or tolerant, you know?
Right, it's about actively seeking out information,
Yeah.
engaging with different perspectives even, or maybe especially, when it challenges our own views.
Yes. Informed action. Not blind optimism or just hoping for the best.
So it's about actually doing the work, the learning, the listening, the uncomfortable conversations sometimes.
And remember, that action can take many forms. It could be as simple as, I don't know, having that difficult conversation with a family member who sees things differently. Or it could be more public, like organizing a protest or even running for office yourself. The point is, it all matters.
It's recognizing that we all have a role to play, that we can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things.
And that's the empowering part, but also maybe a little daunting, right? The fate of democracy really does rest, at least in part, on each of us.
It makes you really stop and think about your own choices, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how you're engaging with the world.
Are you contributing to the division and distrust that's out there? Or are you actively trying to bridge those divides?
To find common ground.
Exactly. And look, none of us are perfect. We all mess up. But it's about that constant effort, right? Striving to learn, to grow, to be a little braver, a little more informed, and maybe just a little bit kinder every day.
Because even those small acts of courage, of connection, they can have a ripple effect.
They really can. And, Butler talks about this too, how change often starts with just one person daring to imagine something different.
Daring to speak up,
Mm-hmm.
to take that first step.
Yeah, and what's so powerful about her work is that she doesn't shy away from the darkness, from the challenges, but she always points us towards possibility, towards hope. Remember that line from Parable of the Sower, where she writes, "There is no end to what a living world will demand of you."
Wow. Yeah.
Butler understood that change is going to happen. It's inevitable. But what that change looks like, well, that's up to us.
So it starts with being willing to look in the mirror a bit, right? To face those uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about the world.
Confront our own biases.
Exactly. And then taking action based on what we learn. Because if we don't actually believe a better world is possible, why would we ever fight for it?
It all comes down to action, right? Grounded in both belief and knowledge. Like you said, it's not just about wishing things were different.
Okay, so how does this all tie back to leadership? We've covered a lot of ground here.
Well, think about it. If we want leaders who embody empathy, courage, wisdom,
Integrity.
yes, we need to be cultivating those same qualities in ourselves.
It's like we're always choosing our leaders, even in our everyday interaction.
That's a great way to put it.
The way we treat each other, the values we prioritize, the information we consume, it all matters.
Because in a way, every time we choose kindness over cruelty, every time we really listen with an open heart, every time we stand up for what we believe in, even in small ways, we're reinforcing those democratic values.
It's bigger than just casting a ballot every few years. It's about who we are day in and day out.
Yeah, exactly. And that is both a tremendous responsibility and an incredible opportunity.
It's like we talk about democracy as this big, almost abstract thing, but it really does come down to those individual choices, those everyday moments.
Yeah, it's both humbling and empowering, isn't it? We're not just passive recipients of whatever system we happen to be born into.
We have a say. We have agency.
And we have a responsibility, not just to understand the issues, but to understand ourselves, our own biases, the things that might be holding us back from really engaging with the world in a way that supports those democratic ideals.
So it's about more than just reading the news or casting a vote every few years.
It's about self-reflection, critical thinking, having those tough conversations, even when they make us uncomfortable, because those are the conversations that matter. That's how we grow.
And that's how we build a society that can actually sustain a healthy democracy.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing process, and it requires constant effort from all of us. But I think it's worth it, don't you?
I do. I really do. Well, on that note, I think we've done our due diligence on this deep dive. We've covered Arendt, Winnicott, Butler, and wow, it's a lot to process.
It really is. And so much of it circles back to that fundamental question of what it means to be human.
To be part of a community, to grapple with those big, messy questions about power, authority, and responsibility.
Exactly. And to never stop learning, never stop questioning.
Because that's how we evolve, both individually and as a society. So to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you'll keep those conversations going, keep those critical thinking caps on, and until next time, take care.